Hey everybody, this is Brandon hanging out again in the basement. Today we're going to be talking about productivity without setting goals. Hope you enjoy it. So I'm working on this project in November. It's called Friendsgiving. It's actually I thought of doing it because I was out of town in Japan for most of October. I really didn't get a chance to do Inktober. And I also had just barely quit my job working at Disney. It's kind of a big transitional, crazy time. But now that we're in November, I've had some time to kind of slow down and start working on things. And I decided I wanted to do something like Inktober, where I was working on an image every day to give me a chance to kind of just find some challenges, push myself and just get some work done. So this is a character from a book called Little Robot by Ben Hatke. And it's kind of a really fun book. I think what Ben's done with it is really interesting. It's very visual, relies mostly on visuals, very little dialogue, and it's just really delightful, great feeling to it. Um, because it is so visual, I actually don't even know what the name of this character is. I kind of just, for myself, I call it the hunter bot because it's kind of hunting down um, this little robot that's kind of fallen from its shipping container. So we'll just for my sake, we'll just in the sake of this video, we're just going to call it the hunter bot. So drawn this hunter bot, um, and it's a really fun design. I love the design that Ben's done, and that's kind of one of the really great things about working on someone else's design, and that's kind of the really fun thing I found about doing this Friendsgiving. I'm already, I think, am I like 15 into it? I think this might be number 15. I'm not totally sure. But when you're doing other people's work, especially when you're doing like fan art that isn't for super common stuff, like I'm not doing Superman, I'm not doing Batman or Wolverine. This is less unconventional um, fan art. It's just a really great way to kind of get out of your comfort zone, to try some different design challenges. I have the chance to kind of sit down here and say, what would my take on this character be, and still try to be true to the original design. I mean, the original design is so fun. There isn't very much that I want to do here that would be different from what Ben's already done. So anyway, it's been a fun project. I'm actually, as I get into the topic of that I kind of decided on today, I'm going to talk a little bit more about Friendsgiving and kind of some of my reflections on it, and what I've learned from it. So yeah, maybe I'll start talking about that a little bit. Uh, so to start off with, the idea for this discussion came from a question I got while I was streaming, just working on a comic book page. I was working on my comic Green Monk, and someone asked the question about kind of how I deal with productivity. Like, do I set goals for myself? Do I have a certain schedule that I want to finish pages? And without having, making you have to go to the actual stream and look up the information and try to find where I actually made those comments, I thought I would try to sum them up a little bit more here, maybe organize my thoughts a little bit better, make it a little less rambly. I also think the audio ended up being really bad on the stream, so I doubt any of you have heard what I have to say anyway. So I'm just trying to kind of figure out. It's got kind of these pincers here. I'm trying to figure out perspective and figure out kind of how I want these pincers to be. So um, yeah, something like this. I'll kind of figure it out. So let's talk a little bit more about goals and productivity. So goals are probably the go-to first thing you're going to hear when you start thinking about and talking about productivity. It's part of our culture. I've set goals. I'm sure everyone here has set some sort of goals at some time, and I'm sure everyone can tell you about, a good goal is specific and achievable and all that other stuff. So I'm not going to go into too much detail on goal setting. I think most of you guys kind of know the rigmarole on goal setting. I've actually made quite a lot of commentary in the past about my opinions about goal setting. I think goal setting in the right context can be fantastic, but I also think that goal setting can cause some big problems sometime and can actually really undermine creativity if you're not thoughtful about how the goal setting is happening or why you're setting goals. I wrote a blog post on this topic a couple years back. I've included that in the link in the description below. But anyway, my main gist of the blog post is that sometimes setting goals can backfire. And I have had some goals that I've set where I was really determined and really stuck with the goals. And kind of the main gist of the problem that can emerge with goal setting is that goal setting is kind of a way of making a demand on life. We all like to feel in control of our lives. We like to feel that we can make a difference, that we can kind of make the world, at least the immediate world around us, that we can make that world the way we want it to be. And goals are kind of a way of saying, I demand that the world will be this way um, at this time on this date. And sometimes we can follow through that demand. Sometimes we can deliver, but because kind of the nature of how we are doing it, uh, the demands can kind of cause some unwanted side effects. Sometimes we can end up compromising things that are important to us. Sometimes we can be too harsh on ourselves. Sometimes we can be really inflexible, and all of those things can really hurt creativity. I mean, if you are an artist and you are trying to come up with new ideas and interesting approaches, you need to be creative. If you can't be flexible, if you can't find ways to healthily unwind, if you can't be healthy mentally, physically, if you're letting the setting of goals ruin your health, ruin your relationships, then goals are going to undermine your creativity as well, and your art's going to suffer for that. So, that being said, there are definitely times and places where goals, where they have their place. I think, if you've made a commitment, um, and it's not an absurd commitment that you've made, if you've made a reasonable commitment to someone, a reasonable, healthy commitment to someone, I think it's fine to set a goal to keep that commitment. I think also that everyone has kind of their own peculiar ways of being productive and getting things done. And if you've just found that setting goals works for you, like by all means, keep setting goals, keep hitting targets. If that's your golden ticket to productivity, don't change it. Keep doing it. What I wanted to talk about just a little bit is an alternative. What's an alternative mindset, an alternative approach to setting a goal that can keep you productive? And this approach has been basically the bedrock for all my productivity for the last 6 or 7 years at least, in regards to personal projects. I don't really think about that in regards to work. The fact that uh, your paycheck is dependent on what you complete. That's usually incentive enough to finish things at work. So this really has to do with my personal projects, and this is the approach that I've taken. Like I said, over the last 6 or 7 years, it's really worked for me. I've been able to produce work at a reasonable pace with this approach. And I have to pay tribute to the sources that kind of led me to this approach. So, two fantastic books Stephen Pressfield's The War of Art. There's also a great book called The Now Habit. War of Art is really a book written for artists. It's a book written by a guy that really struggled as a screenwriter for years and kind of found his way in his 40s, found his kind of way of doing things and his vibe. Um, and so it's a really great kind of philosophical guide for artists. The Now Habit is a great book on procrastination. I mean, I've read a million books on procrastination, and guess what? Most of them have to do with setting goals. And The Now Habit is one of the first books, it's probably the only goal on procrastination I've read that isn't about setting goals. So, what do these two books have in common? What is it that they both kind of recommend that that helped me to be productive? So, the biggest thing is, as an alternative to setting a goal, you can set a schedule. So, what does setting a schedule mean? Setting a schedule means you are going to set apart a block of time, and it doesn't even need to be super frequent. It could be, once a day, 15 minutes a day. It could be 3 times a week, an hour each day. It could be once a week for 2 hours. But regardless, you find a chunk of time, a regular chunk of time that you commit to as a time when you are going to work on your work and not let anything distract you. And that's what setting a schedule is. Um, and so I've got kind of 3 tips to having a productive schedule, for making a schedule work for you as an artist. Let me kind of go through these one by one and talk about how they apply to um, productivity and to setting a schedule. The first one is focus. And this is huge. There are, psychologists that study New Year's resolutions, and kind of what they say over and over again is the resolutions that are successful are the resolutions that are really manageable, they're really focused. So rather than having 5 projects you're trying to juggle, where you're trying to play in a band, you're trying to write a screenplay, you're trying to spend some time working on your comic, you have some sort of illustration gig going on, choose one project at a time. You know, look at your portfolio of things you want to do, sit down, carefully examine them, and decide on the one that really, really matters to you. Um, and you may find that after you spend time and focus on that, you might find reasons why that may not be the thing you want to spend time on. But you kind of need to commit to it to answer that question. So, first of all, focus. Second, be consistent. Marcelo Vignali, who's a viz dev guy, he was at Disney and DreamWorks. I think he might have been at Sony. I could be wrong. Amazing artist. Everyone should know who he is. I heard an interview with him once where he talked about how he used to do figure drawing at Disney, and there were times when he would skip figure drawing and he would say, I've got reasonable reasons to not be doing figure drawing, whatever the reasons are. I got to pick up the kids, I need to go shopping, etc., etc. And he finally said, I had to be unreasonable. And I think what that is saying is that once you have set apart your time, when you need to do your thing, you need to treat that time um, as sacred time. It's time that, unless the house is on fire or someone is in deathly need, you stay true to that time. You stick to that time and that commitment that you've made. That being said, you are going to have days when you just do not feel like working and you just are miserable. You are not feeling it. You don't even want to pick up the pencil. When you have days like that, still do some work. I always say that always do some work, even when you're really miserable. And I have days when I do not want to work. Because kind of one trick, kind of sub trick here in the being consistent part is if you do have one of those days when you don't want to do work, say to yourself, hey, I'm just going to do 10 minutes. Just going to do 10 minutes. I'm going to sit down and work on that for 10 minutes. And oftentimes, what you find is that once you start working that 10 minutes, you get into the flow, you start feeling better, and you want to spend more time um, working on the project. And you may end up spending the full time that you've set apart to do the project. So, kind of the next sub tip in consistency, maybe I should have broken this out into 5 tips, is to end when it's time to end. If you've set apart an hour to work on your art, when that hour comes to an end, put your art to the side and go do something else. Part of being creative and healthy is having other things you do besides art. And part of building up the skill of working when you don't want to work, the flip side of that is stopping working when you want to work. And if you stop working when you do want to work, you're actually helping to build that same skill that will help you when you have those days when you don't want to work. So if you've set a schedule, end when it's time to end that schedule. Kind of the last tip is kind of counterintuitive, but it's kind of saying that, if you cannot be consistent, then be persistent. I'll tell you, for how much I lecture and tell my own self about being consistent, I have some of the hardest time being consistent with the projects that I do. So, what I have to tell myself is for those times that I can't be consistent, I need to be persistent. And this means that when you do make a mistake, when you do are too lazy and you end up not working on the project, you kind of just need to put that behind you. You need to think about the day that's in front of you, and you need to get up and just do work that day. Um, Speaking of Friendsgiving, this actually relates quite a bit to Friendsgiving. I got through Friendsgiving and I got to about part way through, and I just had a moment when I just kind of burned out. I had a day when I didn't want to do a drawing, and I ended up skipping 3 days. So, what is my reaction that to be going to be? If I kind of come back with that really harsh goal-based mindset, I can say, "Oh, I failed my goal. I didn't do, all 30 days of Friendsgiving. What a failure, what a waste." But if I can stay more focused on the schedule, I can just say, "Okay, let's get back on schedule. What's tomorrow? Like, let's just get back on schedule tomorrow." And guess what? At the end of the month, I will have a good chunk of new art. I will have challenged myself and I will have made progress. So even when you can't be consistent, just be persistent. Just stick with it. The other way I like to think about it is kind of like you're like a lazy Terminator. You know how like the Terminator is relentless. It's got one mission, and that's to you know chase down John Connor. So I like to think about like there's the T1000, the T800. There's like the T50. This is like the lazy Terminator. And this is the Terminator that like wants to binge watch Daredevil and wants to take a nap, and he does those things. Sometimes he's lazy, but when he's not lazy, he's still chasing down John Connor. So just leave room in yourself to be a lazy Terminator, to let yourself have your lazy moments, and just know that when you aren't having those moments, you're going to get back up and you're going to keep chasing down the objective. So I guess kind of the big picture when we think about kind of this setting of a schedule as an alternative to setting goals is that as you just kind of work on a project persistently, even when you end up skipping days and missing days, if you just kind of keep consistently just hammering away, it's a lot like Shawshank Redemption. You kind of need to have some patience for it to work. Um, but if you keep chipping away with that little rock hammer, eventually you are going to break through that wall. Eventually you are going to ship work. You're going to be able to fill up a sketchbook. You are going to improve as an artist. And little by little, you are going to get to this place that you want to be at. So that's kind of my take on productivity. Like I said, that's really been the anchor of what I've used to get things done. And I'll tell you, I'm probably, for those that know me, I'm pretty notoriously inconsistent and pretty lazy as an artist. But I still complete things because I don't beat myself up about it. I stay persistent with it. I try to be as consistent as I can. And I really try to just to remove all the distractions I can as I work on projects. And it's something I'm getting better over time. I still make mistakes. I still have times when I overcommit to things. But case in point, one of the reasons I decided to quit my job is just it's focus. I really want to be able to focus on my comic. I want to be more consistent in completing my comic. And so sometimes removing that distraction means, quitting your job. Um, and thank God I have the way financially to kind of deal with this right now. But a lot of those distractions are going to be different things. So I hope that was useful for you. If you have any questions, you can always ask those questions in the comments below. You can also follow me on any of the social media that I've listed, and you can ask me other questions for that social media as well. And I'm sure I'll have a chance to answer your questions while I do some drawing.
So there it is. Hope you liked it. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.